Are you feeling anxious, overwhelmed, and disenchanted by life, the universe, and everything? Maybe you're frustrated with the talking heads who say one thing and do something completely different. Yeah, me too. Welcome to People Watching, a podcast where we figure out what it looks like to become the role model we've always wanted by talking with real people who found real role models in their own lives. Together, we cut through all the noise and identify better sources of hope, creativity, and wisdom as we explore how we learn to make decisions about the kind of life we want to live. So join us. Let's do some people watching. This is your host, Megan J. Robinson. My guest today is Rachel Hastings. I've known Rachel for almost 10 years now, ever since we started working together in 2015. Getting to know each other through different seasons of life has built a cherished friendship that continues to evolve. As in every conversation I have with Rachel, we cover a lot of ground, from parenting to the American Evangelical Church, to what it means to stay true to self, even while inhabiting so many different roles in life. The themes of self-awareness and self-interrogation came up over and over again throughout our conversation, and I'm going to be thinking a lot about how that posture and practice shows up, not just in my own life, but in others' lives as well. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation. We're in the studio. Welcome to People Watching, Rachel.
Hello.
So as we get started, one of the things that I would love to do is just kind of share some of the expectations and the guides around our conversation for us, for our listeners. That is how we're going to show up for each other on this conversation and how we're going to show up for the listeners. So, Rachel, would you like to start us off reading those?
Absolutely. The first one is whatever we share is by invitation, not obligation. If either of us is not comfortable pursuing a topic, let's just say, I'd prefer not to share. Thank you.
Awesome. And also, silence is a partner in our conversation. So we can feel free to take a moment to reflect without immediately filling the space with words. And this also can leave room for our inner teacher to whisper to us as well.
The next rule is be present as fully as possible. This is a space to acknowledge our doubts, fears, and failings as much as it is a space to share our joys, convictions, and successes.
Absolutely. And finally, we can ask open, honest questions. Because if we're not sure what the other person meant by the question or the statement, ask. It gives us the chance to clarify or rephrase. And also, we can ask questions that we genuinely don't know the answer to. Surprise is a great catalyst of insight. I think a lot of what I'm hearing is this kind of theme of like injustice, incongruity, and I'm just wondering, now when you go into different situations, when you go into a new situation or any context and you're encountering people, what is it that you're looking for? Like what are green flags? What are yellow flags? What are red flags? I'm just curious what that, now that you have the experience, now that you have the insight and the wisdom, now that you have other people around you who are able to kind of, give you fuller picture of a human being. What is it? What do you look for? What is it that you're going, oh, okay, that's someone who's displaying things that I appreciate. That's someone who's not.
Yeah. Well, I think the hard thing is not is none of us, as I've said, this is like not good enough. It's also true. Like none of us is perfect, right? So it's like you're collecting green flags from all different kinds of people, right? And I try to be a student of like, well, this person's really good at this, but they're not at this, and how do these two different people's green flags? How would those things work together? Are they in concert? Could those two things exist in one person and be in concert together? I don't know. I think to me the biggest green flag is that you have things in place in your life, systems in place in your life that allow you to self interrogate. I think you just have to be your own biggest, like, not critic, but you're the person who's always kind of calling into question your own motivations because you know yourself better than anybody else, right? Like, you have to say, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think the people that I know that are doing that, and they have like, whether it's a spiritual director, whether it's a group of friends, but I think also another way of doing that is just to constantly, in most of the churches that I was in, this was part of the problem. Was the elder board's situation was one where it was like, well, we don't want people that are going to cause problems on the elder board. It's like, well, what are you really saying there? You're saying you don't want anybody who's going to ask you questions, right? Like, let's be honest with ourselves here. And so being honest with what is going to happen when you set up a system. If you're a leader and you're a part of an organization, you need to be honest about how the structure is going to shape the dynamics and interactions. You need to be honest about the fact that you cannot see what it feels like to be on the other side of power. So the only way that you can know what it's like, or a lot of leaders be like, I don't understand. Someone can come to me at any point and tell me, no, they can't. Like, that's delusional. No one who doesn't have power is going to come to a person that has power and say, let me speak my mind to you. Like, you're a bad leader if you think that. I hate to say it that directly, but it's true. Like, if you think people are going to come and talk to you about what they think is wrong with your leadership, you don't understand what leadership is, and you probably shouldn't be a leader. People will not come talk to you. Do you know what they will do? They'll talk to each other. That's what they'll do. And then the next worst thing you can do is shame them for talking to each other and gossiping or whatever. Like, no, friend, they're triangulating because they're anxious around you. Do you not get this? Do you not understand how any of this works? Apparently not. So the green flags for me are that people are self-aware of the systems that they find themselves in, and then they're taking steps to steward their power well. And I would say practical steps for stewarding power well is understand how money works. If you make a lot more money than people at your organization, and you have backdoors built in because you're older and you're more established, you need to understand how desperate some of those people feel. Find ways to figure out how that feels. Go back and remember what that feels like. Don't say stupid stuff like, well, I had to do that, so they had to do. Don't do that. Don't do that. Build some compassion in your soul and understand that in 2024, when a 25-year-old is trying to live in a high cost of living space and you're paying them $40,000 a year and they want to buy a house when the mortgage rate is 7% right now, and you can't get a starter house for $400,000 and they have student loans, that you're putting them in a really precarious spot, and they are never going to tell you what they think because they need that job. I'd say that's the first thing, is be aware of how these systems work and how your power is leveraged in those positions. Then if you're going to actually follow what Jesus did, you're going to take that power and you're going to lay it down. And you're going to find really creative ways and say, in this context with these people, what do I need to do to lay down my life for my friends? And I would say that looks like finding ways to make systemic change so that there's like good financial practices in organizations where people have good career paths, where people feel valued, where people don't feel exploited. That you're making constant deposits over time. And I'd say a really easy way to do that too is like, you can always tell the kinds of people I think that are good leaders because they don't discriminate against spending time with people who do have power and who don't have power. They will shoot the breeze with anybody because they understand that everybody has value.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. I remember talking to someone who was a student at another campus of the seminary, and we were experiencing some tension in our conversation because she had nothing but positive things to say about a lot of the faculty. And I did not have that experience at all. And it was interesting because for her, the conversation ended, I think, in a way where she felt like she had to convince me of the positives. And I was kind
Yeah.
of saying, two things can be true at the same time. You can have a great experience with those specific people. I cannot. And I can tell you why. It's because they think you
Mm-hmm.
are worth spending time with, and I am not, because of where I sit in this organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You
And
yes.
and it was just it was a very frustrating conversation to have, but also to walk away from. And for me, it solidified, like, you will never convince me that I should respect someone who they see as lesser than that way.
Mm.
One of the things I've always admired about you was just your your steadfastness, which is what we'll call your stubbornness, um, your steadfastness in being and becoming yourself
Mm.
while also inhabiting these different roles. You were a student. You've described yourself as a pastor's wife. You are a wife. You are a mom. You are an employee. You are a manager, a leader, a friend, all of these different roles. And so often, and this is not a judgment on anybody, because I think it's just a natural consequence of, you have to keep these small human beings alive. And but so often, so many women end up only or primarily identifying as one role. So what I'm trying to say is, I have admired that you have worked hard to remain yourself while you are also inhabiting these roles. And I know that that's
Mm.
clearly not been an easy journey, by any stretch. And I would love to know how if that is also shaping how you are parenting your kids, or the influence that you're hoping to have on them.
That's a great question. And I appreciate that encouragement because most of the time it feels like I'm surrounded by people who are telling me, I'm not showing up in those spaces, right? In the way that I should. Other than perhaps employee, I'm a pretty good employee, right? Like
You testify
that
to
one I've got down. Thank you. But I would say, especially as mom and wife, a pastor's wife was like, oh my gosh, like I showed up in ways that made people super uncomfortable. Um, and of course, I think there's like a level of shame in that. Like, is there something wrong with me? Am I like not polished enough? Am I too, one time someone called me a brain on a stick because I cared about like the new perspective on Paul. And they're like, that's just not things that like the people in the pews care about. And I would argue now that people in the pews still should care about them. I think I was right back then in my 20s. And I would say there probably needs to be a book written on that, that the average person could read and understand. It's just a question of whether you've adequately made it a felt need or not for people. I would say the answer to that question is showing up as myself has been really painful, but showing up not as myself, I think, was worse.
Mm.
Because when you show up as yourself, inevitably, and it's not usually the people you think it's going to be, but there's someone in that sphere who needs you to show up as yourself. It's usually not the people in power. They usually don't like it. But in those spheres, you're gonna hit somebody and it's gonna be in a surprising place, and they're gonna be so grateful that they showed up as themselves. I think in many ways I'm glad I showed up as myself, um and I think with my kids for a long I think, okay, I'll say this. With kids, the hardest part was imagining raising kids that were in my own image. And then when they're not in your own image, there's a deep level of disappointment that things didn't go the way that you thought they would. My kids don't enjoy the same things that I enjoy, a lot of them. The things that they're passionate about are not the things I'm passionate about. The ways that they engage with the world are very different. And some of them more so than others. Some of them, there are little pieces, but like none of them are like, none of them are like a kindred spirit like me. And you have to push through. And there was a time I think where I was trying to make it all work, you know, so that we showed up and did like spiritual activities together and like talked about things that were important and blah, blah, blah. And like they just weren't resonating with that. And the things that they love, the sports that they love, the activities they love are just not things that I love. I don't love soccer. I don't, I don't love getting my nails done. My daughter loves that. I love to read. All my kids hate that. Um, and, and I, but here's the thing is they're not done being formed, right? I don't know who they're going to be in 10 or 20 years, but they're going to be that person longer than they're this person right now. And so it's less important in my mind now to make them parrot the right things and wear the right clothes and show up the right way to things. What's more important to me now is to let them make the kind of mistakes that they can make in a controlled environment and try on these different personas as they figure out who they are, and me be their biggest champion as best I can with my limitations. Like I will be a soccer mom, but I will never be the soccer mom that's like drinking mimosas at 9 a.m. in the morning and like wearing like the garb of my kids. You know, I'm going to have my Kindle in my hand. That's how I'm going to show up as a soccer mom. But I will show up and I'll be there. And it's uncomfortable for me, like sometimes. And I still don't know what the heck is going on. I'm getting better at seeing offsides and like understanding what my kids are doing, but I don't know. But I try to be a good student of it. I try my best.
I think that as a parent, for your kid to know that you love them, no matter what, would be huge. I think that that would be a bedrock that would matter no matter what.
You would think. You would think. But I mean, I think a lot of I think a lot of Christians would say I'm unprincipled for that, right? Like helping a kid feel like, and like, this goes back to like, I think like love, um, and is like a tacit endorsement. People are really, I think it's like we're pragmatic about all the wrong things today. I think there actually is like a level of pragmatism to our faith that is a good thing, that we've kind of lost. And then we've befriended a form of pragmatism, usually that involves money generation, that's really unhelpful. But it's like, at what point, when did we decide that like saying I like somebody, or I endorse a book, or like means I agree with everything in it? Like that is actually really, really unhelpful, I think. Like deformation that's happened in like the social digital sphere. And so like my thought is that some people might see like me saying like, oh, I just want my kids to feel loved. They would look at that as like, oh well, obviously your first love should be Jesus. And that might mean like that, those who love me like hate their mother and hate their brother. Like you might have to tell your kids like they're not welcome because they're like this, or they're doing this, or admonish them, rebuke their sin, cast them out of the community, or whatever. And I would just say that I think you can love somebody, and you can have them be a part of your life, and not because you're like soft on sin or something like that, but it's because you actually have a really deep providential trust in God doing the work in their lives, and that you don't have to be the person that's doing the work in their lives, and that the challenges that they face are unique to them, just like the challenges that you face are unique to you, and that's okay. Like God is working that out in them. um but like, if I think when we like care so much about the manifestation of how people are like trying to figure out how to live in this world, like, no, that's okay, but that's not okay. When we talk to people like that, and that's like where the primary focus of like, did we speak that right, did we say that right, in our personal relationships, it's like so exhausting being in those spaces. It's just so exhausting. If we could just be a little more, I think, curious, and this is what I was encouraging someone in my life to do the other day. I don't think it came off, I don't think they caught the drift, but there was a little bit of like a, why do these people not like this political, why do young people not like this political figure? Like, what happened to the morals and values of this country, kind of thing. And it's like, well, what if you were curious and you just started to ask yourself, like, why are they so defensive about the stance that this person, is it because they're like moral degenerates, or perhaps they might have something that would be interesting for you to hear and to say. But I don't know. A lot of people, I think, see that as like capitulating to culture. I just kind of think it's a way of being at peace with the fact that of your finitude, and you don't know everything. And we're all learners, and we all see through a glass darkly. And there's a way that you can love people and just like be present with them and enjoy being with them, regardless of if they like articulate their faith the same way you do. And like, what does it say that like we're proud that we like indoctrinated our kids in a certain way by the time they're adults? I don't know. Like, to me, that's just not a banner or like a trophy that I'm particularly interested in anymore. I want my kids to go on the journey that they've been called to go on, and I trust that God's going to work it out for them in the end. And my job is just to, love them and be present with them. Yeah, the internet's a weird place. I think there's just a lot of weird stuff with like parasocial relationships. And I used to think like, oh, what is it going to look like when like every secret thought is like Jesus talks about like every thought that you've had is going to be like looked at and like judged or whatever. And I was like, how would that even look like? It's so overwhelming. And then I realized like, oh no, we have everybody's social media feeds. That's like essentially happening right now, where it's like people are just, they're just doing it like willfully. And you're like, dude, keep that. You have no shame. And they're doing it in like the name of taking a stand or whatever. It's like really bizarre. I don't know,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of inside thoughts that I'd be like, I don't really want to. It's, maybe I shouldn't say that out loud because it's not ready to be said out loud. So that's why you need real friends in like geographical space, because you need somebody that has the guts to tell you that that's a dumb idea before you put it out on the internet.
I remember years ago, um, someone who was worked in campus ministry at the college I attended. I had been dealing with um, coming out of a romantic relationship that I was in, and this campus pastor said one time, in terms of intimacy and vulnerability, the next time you're about ready to say something to this person, she was using it in the context of a romantic relationship, but I think this works in an age of social media as well. Next time you're about ready to say something, think about, would I be okay if a room full of people knew this about me? And I think a lot, sometimes I get ready to say something and I'm like, I don't think I want anybody else to know this. I don't think they need to know. It's not helpful. It's not good. It wouldn't do anything. So that was a helpful rubric that I received a long time ago. When I started in seminary, I had a friend who got very upset with me because she thought that she thought that my going to seminary, I would be much more willing to fight for Jesus, kind of thing, like that kind of language. And she was disappointed that I wasn't. And I just remember going, I'm just very confused because I don't think he ever asked us to fight for him. And I think that we have warped the invitation to speak truthfully and divorced it from the command to love first. And I don't think that speaking truth is very effective without a relationship of love. And I think that that's where so much of the front stage, the front porch communication goes wrong.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like the language, the warfare language, like, it's so weird to me because like even Augustine says, and I'm not even like a huge like Augustine girly or anything, but like he says, like, yeah, you don't know. Here's the thing about the city of God, like you don't actually know who's going to be a member of the city of God. That's what you have to watch out for. Like if Augustine says that, right? Like you would think people would maybe be a little slower to like pull out the literal sword and be like, I'm gonna eviscerate you, all in the name of Jesus. I ascribe more to kind of that nonviolent idea. I think there's New Testament evidence to that. But I also, and early church history, just like people who converted to Christianity, and Caesar and the Lamb by George Chrysanthus is a great book that kind of goes into the like actual primary source material that shows like soldiers literally saying like, oh, I cannot in good conscience do this job anymore. I mean, that's something that like I think as Christians, if we take the Bible seriously and take the tradition of the church seriously, we as Christians should be at least interrogating ourselves and saying like, okay, what does that mean that we like live in one of the most like strongest militaries in the whole world, that like is a huge, talk about power, like player in global policy, and Christians like want to like get in bed with this and shake hands with this, right? Like what does that mean? And this is what I'm talking about with this like self-interrogation. If we're not asking ourselves these questions at an existential level, like how dangerous it is that we are seeking out power, like I, and there's so many, and you ask like, well, why don't you bend yourself into this anymore? Because I actually think, and you talk about moving into your prophetic, you're like, why am I not trying to put my voice on the table about these things? I for so long tried to like say it diplomatically and like whatever. And at this point, I'm like, maybe if everybody else is feeling the need to kind of shoot straight about these things, maybe I should, maybe I have a moral responsibility too as well. At worst case scenario, it it's just another voice in the in the black hole of the internet and whatever. But I do think, and at the end of the day, it's these relationships with real people. And I'm not saying real as in the internet is fake and real life is real. We are on a call right now, right? We're not in the same geographic space. I'm actually not somebody who thinks like geographic proximity is inherently superior, but I think there is a difference between like I built a friendship with somebody on the internet versus I'm just building a persona on the internet saying stuff to rile people up and get likes. That's not a real relationship. But it's not really a real relationship if you're in the same room with someone and you're preaching and you're saying all this stuff and this is your persona and your actual inner life isn't seen by anyone either. So same problem.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really wrestling with that. What physical proximity does a lot. But one of the things that I feel like I'm also hearing you say a lot, and I want to know, I'd like to hear what you think about this, is that the people that you're paying attention, so self-interrogation, self-awareness, people who have that, who are willing to undergo that, who are willing to cultivate that, but also people who steward power or steward the responsibility that they have, or steward, you know, I'm trying to think through power because we only have power if other people agree we have it, right? Like power is not something you inherently have. It's not something you inherently possess. It is a communal assent to someone having this kind of authority over other people. So what I'm hearing is that one, it's not done well, and two, you look like a green flag for you and someone that you would admire or someone that you would spend time with or someone that you would imitate is someone who is cognizant of the fact that they have been given this kind of authority or this kind of power in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think that yeah, and it comes with a self-awareness, right? And I think the ability to hold loosely to that power, I think that is inherent too. And that's what's so counterintuitive to the mega church model is like to get into power, you have to look like you know what you're doing and you have a plan and you're mobilizing people and you're slick, and like literally none of those things are a good recipe for like helping protect you from the pitfalls of power. Well, actually all of those things will, and this is part of the problem too with the publishing industry. I mean, like I've said it for a long time, something that I think about all the time is if we're asking authors to have a platform, um platform is built by being slick. It's by having pithy statements on the internet and getting followers and all this stuff. And I'm convinced there's got to be other ways to do this, right? I mean, I'm always thinking about, okay, how do we subvert the process of writing and communication, like from the grips of capitalism that's just deforming the whole process right now like into some really gross things. So that is the conundrum, right? I work in an industry that wants to acquire books that are going to sell. Well, in order to guarantee that books are going to sell, there needs to be networks. The author that brings in more networks is more likely to sell books. The kind of person that can build that kind of network perhaps is not always spiritually well.
Yeah.
And that's one scenario. The other scenario, right, is that you find somebody that's a good writer and they don't have a platform and they write something that hits at the right time in the right audience and it takes off. It gets a good marketing, backing, and it takes off because it's a good book. And then a person that's never been in power all of a sudden all of a sudden has a platform, and they're not ready for that either. And the publishing industry isn't going to help you and be like, let me help you steward and make sense of what is happening so rapidly to you. You are on your own, man. And so then what does that mean? How am I complicit in deforming potential authors? And this is a conversation I have with some of my authors, like when they want to write about things, and I know they're part of institutions that, this is one of the ways I try to subvert that and show people that I care, is like they want to write something and I know they're a part of an institution that has a pretty clear doctrinal party line, and we have a doctrinal sort of thing, but ours is very broad. And then we have people within those spaces that have more narrow manifestations of what that looks like. And I say things like, are you prepared for this book to get you in trouble? What would it mean if you got fired from your job for this book? Because I want you to understand the ramifications of what this book could mean for your career if you publish this book. That's the loving thing to do. The unloving thing to do would be like, oh yeah, this book is going to sell. I don't need to warn them about anything. It's their problem. They're the one that proposed the book. That's their problem. No, that is I'm absolving myself of responsibility. I'm not going to steward my power and my knowledge of the industry well and what can happen. And so I think it's just like, it's finding stuff like that, little ways that you can rehumanize people. And proximity is one way. I don't think it's the only, geographic proximity is not the only way, because people can hide no matter where they are in geographic proximity. And I wouldn't say necessarily that yes, our unique relationship is predicated on physical time together, but like, we have to remember that the possibility of meaningful relationship and role models and the kind of ways of living, it's not limited to the lucky people who live in a place where there's tons of awesome people around. Rural people have this opportunity. People with different abilities who can't leave their house have this opportunity. That is the good thing about the internet. That is the good thing about digital spaces, is that it has allowed people who otherwise have not been in places of privilege because they can't get to a big city, or for whatever reason, or a place that's well networked, or they don't have money to go to seminary or whatever. They have access to stuff now and they can say things too, and I think that's a good thing. There are still the problems there. Everything has problems and challenges to it, but that is one good thing that I think is worth acknowledging in all of this, is that the gatekeepers don't get to gatekeep the knowledge the way that they were 20 or 30 years ago, and that is, I think, a good thing. So I hope that I hope that kind of like, I think proximity is a thing, but I think we would be wrong to limit proximity to geographic proximity. I think there's other ways of doing proximity,
One of the things I was thinking about recently with regard to proximity, so I'm thinking in terms of like our personal spheres, which would be family, friends. Then you have your communal sphere, which is your second and third spaces. And then you have the extended sphere, which would be online, historical, and fictional, like digital. Extended could also be like national or global figures, people that you see in very specific contexts, but you're unlikely to have any kind of real two-way interaction with them. And I've been thinking in terms of, the one-to-one relationship between you and the center of those radiating spheres, and the people on the other end of it. But then I have the thought of, what about proximate, like the people that you're looking at or the people that you're observing? What about the people that they're in proximity with? What about the company they keep as well? Can that be also a source of insight, of information? And so I'm thinking about proximity as in, who do you keep company with? Who do they keep company with? Um, yeah, so I think, just to kind of build off of what you were just saying in terms of proximity, isn't always physical geography. Um, it isn't always digital proximity either. It's also the networks around us. So I'm just, it's just a thought that I've been playing around with.
Yeah, and I think the flip side too is like when we over rely on digital proximity, um uh, we're at risk, I think, of being in an echo chamber. I think the same problem comes from self-selecting pools. You see this at universities, denominations, things like that, where that's like your only people. They all think the way that you do. They're the kinds of people that are opting into that community because they already believe a certain set of things and have a certain set of values. And there's benefit to that, but you can't only have that. And this is like one of the things when people talked about like the superiority of like in-person education versus like remote or hybrid education. And there are pros and cons. I go back to this again, like there are pros and cons. This is just like, are you sending your kid to homeschool or public school? Like there are, let's talk about how to support people in both, because if you go and you're 22 years old and you go up and do your MDiv up at some like little community for 4 years, that's going to be a great, wonderful experience with people that want to like talk about life with you, and like you can like exegete passages together and like work on your like, papers together. But that is not real life. That is not real life. It does not keep you tethered to reality.
What's been the most helpful thing for you out of this conversation?
I think looking at like I always love to look at how things are connected, right? Like, so like just seeing new connections to how things I've thought about or experienced over the years might connect into a larger thing. I think you saying, that I'm showing up in way like as myself in these different roles, was something that I'll take with me as an encouragement, because I often feel like it's a deficiency, right? Especially as a mom, and especially as like for a long time as a pastor's wife. I think that can redeem a lot for me, where I felt like I was very, oh man, just even today, where it just feels like the version of me that I want to be, that I am. In certain, I think, family situations, it just feels like everybody's like, that's nice. But we're not actually, we don't really care about that version of you. We're not actually interested in seeing that version of you. Um, and so there's always a level, I think, of mediating in those situations and working through the shame, but also like, it gives me a little bit of encouragement to maybe be a little like I don't need to like apologize to myself for being that way. I'm still gonna mediate myself because I care about those people and they don't want to talk about the things that I want to talk about, and that's fine. Like I'm not gonna make somebody talk about things I don't want to talk about. But I don't think I need to feel and carry around a lot of shame that I can't show up in a way that they wish I would show up. And that's fine because my kids don't show up that way, and I'm working hard to not make them feel bad for not showing up the ways I wish they'd show up. So I can break that. I can break that cycle, I think. Um,
Mm.
and that was encouraging to me. And I think that's something that I'll take with me of like, oh, I can be a cycle breaker here. I can have the next generation feel like they can show up as the version they are at this time and trust that God's working them into the people they need to be. Um, and I can then stop when I'm feeling that, whether it's imposed upon me by parents or, in-laws or anybody like that. Or maybe I'm just perceiving it myself, and that's okay. Like I can be at peace with who I am right now and trust that God is working things out in me in his good timing.
Mm. That's cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing
Yeah, for saying it.
that. Last question. What is the story about the best or the worst taco you have ever had?
The worst taco I've ever had. I mean, I can envision what both will look like. I think the best, I've had there was a little place that we used to eat. I won't say it's the best taco, but it's one that like sticks in my memory as like, like the memories there were good. Our old buildings at IVP, we just moved buildings recently. There was a little place, little taco place that was like right across the street. And they do these like pork belly tacos that I would always get every time I went. I would get one of those and one of the like beef brisket ones. And like it was just like a great, like reasonably priced, get a couple tacos and like chat with your friends. But I like the more stuff that can be put on a taco for me, the better. So like when I think of like a terrible taco, I think of like you bought the hard shell at the store and there's like iceberg lettuce on it, unseasoned ground beef, and like some like shredded pre-shredded cheese from like the bag. That sounds like the worst taco to me. Like everything about that taco sounds terrible.
Yeah. And listeners need to know that this is a woman who makes her own pumpkin pie from scratch every
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
don't even get me started. Don't even get me started. I have really strong feelings about food and I am judgy and I'm okay. And this, you talk about not twisting yourself into like I've decided I like Thanksgiving a certain way. And if nobody else likes it that way, that's fine. Like you go be you, live your best life. My best life is a homemade pumpkin pie. My best life is cornbread stuffing where you make the cornbread 2 days before, then it dries out, then you use that and you make the stuffing. My best life is mashed potatoes, like green beans, and then you just shove the butter all over the turkey, inside the turkey skin. There's like that's my best life. And I think my turkey is good. And I think my food is good. And I make homemade rolls. And if people don't like that, that's fine. You know?
That's your Thanksgiving?
It's my thing every year.
Okay, so now I need to know, would you do a Thanksgiving taco this year?
Ooh, that would be hard because, like, would you make a tortilla or is there like, I do like, like making, like, mixing foods together. I think if you were going to make a Thanksgiving taco, you would do what I would do is I would do like, I would take the turkey and then I would kind of try to like, um, cut up into little pieces, I think, and then maybe like sort of season it and like heat it up. And then I would do like I guess what I would probably do is like take like a kale and like cut it up real small, like marinate it in like some sort of like acidic, whether it be lemon or something like that, or vinegar, and then like do like a vinaigrette on it and like put that on top. And then I would take cranberries and I would make like a cranberry relish, not a sauce, but like a relish with like raw cranberries and stuff, maybe cilantro. So it kind of had like, and I'd put that on top. And then I'd probably make some sort of like crema, like with sour cream, but I might like mix it with like I don't know I would probably take pumpkin and make it kind of like a pumpkin crema that you like put on top and then make that a taco. That actually sounds really good.
It does actually. I'm coming over. Tacos.
Thanksgiving tacos, yeah.
So, where can listeners find you if they would like to check in with you or see what you're up to or hear your latest thought of the day?
Yeah, this is so challenging because as we talk about subverting practices, I am a little bit difficult to find, but you can find me on Twitter at R Hastings 1987. I sometimes talk there, but I specifically don't talk about things that I think that are like directly related to my job on there, because I don't think short form Twitter is very effective. From time
Yeah.
to time, I will post things about my work or like about writing and things like that, but most of it's pretty goofy and sort of like on purpose, very superficial. But I will say that if anybody ever wants to talk to me, they can always DM me. They can always, if they ever have questions about publishing or whatever, they can always email me as well or DM me. And my email for work is rhastings at ivpress.com. And like, I'm always willing to answer questions about publishing, and help people make sense of that. We have, I have long queues. When people send me proposals, I have a very, very specific niche of stuff that I work in. So now I can't just like accept any proposal to read and give my due diligence to, but certainly in like the biblical studies world, people that are working in the academy, I'm always happy to give my best advice at any given time on a proposal. And then, yeah, that's kind of the two places that I am right now. I'm also on LinkedIn, so I guess you could find me there too. And I would be happy to, if anyone ever reaches out to me, even like on LinkedIn, I do try to answer questions people have, or whatever. I'm an open book. I just don't put a lot out there on the
Sure.
internet.
Yes. Well, I have gotten rid of all of my social media except Instagram, and that's just a private account that nobody can find me on. So,
Yeah, it's a challenge. How does one live in these spaces, right? In ways that feels like healthy and good when it feels so unhealthy out there? I don't know
yeah,
the answer. Maybe we can all find new ways of connecting with one another.
yeah.
That social media maybe is the starting point, but it's not the ending point.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rachel.
You are so welcome.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you found something that resonated with you and that helps you become more hopeful, creative, and wise in your own life. Please share this with someone who you think would love this conversation, and like, subscribe, and leave a comment or a review to boost the show. Shalom.